Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 9x90. Today, I have a very special guest, the Paul Hutchinson. For those of you who do not know, he was the co-founder of the infamous Bridge Investment Group. Some of you are familiar with his partner, Mr. John Pennington, who wrote a story in my book. Paul is the one who helped the company to grow to its first 10 billion, which if any of you have started something from scratch, you know exactly how difficult and gruesome that is. So that tells you how much of a gladiator this guy is. I'm sure you're going to be very excited to listen to this episode today. After retiring in 2017, he dedicated himself to combating child trafficking. He founded the Child Liberation Foundation and participated in more than 70 undercover rescue missions across 15 countries. His efforts have contributed to the liberation of more than 5,000 children who were slotted to be sex slaves. Mr. Hutchinson also served as the executive producer of the film Sound of Freedom, which portrays one of the largest child rescue missions in history. He is also the author of an upcoming book, and he has an amazing retreat. So he's all of the things, and we're going to dive into that today.
Thank you, Adi. I am incredibly excited to spend time with you and with your audience today. And I retired when we were just under 20 billion in assets under management. I figured we had 4,000 employees that were running things better than me, and I wanted to spend full time on philanthropy and liberating humanity, not just the children. So we'll go into all of that, but we can start back in the beginning with the company and bring to light this incredible, beautiful, blessed journey that I've had a part in.
So, and you also, your son is second generation as well. So you're officially a multi-generational legacy.
Yes. In fact, I had a conversation with him last night about some things we're doing with the family office and some pretty big growth plans there. And he's like, you know what we should do? He said, we should bring Grandpa on. You know, my dad's in his late 70s now. Now, I was the builder. My dad had a successful company, but he's worth $3-4 million. It's not massive, but when I graduated from high school, we didn't have any furniture in the living room. So no, I didn't get anything from that. He built that after I already got out of the house, but definitely set the example of what was needed to build something substantial in terms of his work ethic. And then, of course, I had the beautiful success in my first company that helped people with anxiety and depression, sold that for $20 million when I was 29 years old. Used that money to start investing in real estate. Realized if I didn't hire guys smarter than me, I was going to lose my money in real estate. So I put together a power team, which ended up now being upwards of 50 billion in assets under management. So incredibly grateful for that road. And my son, Jordan, putting on the Jets and Capital event and these high-end, highly curated events. I told him the thing that you're doing right, Jordan, is you're doing real vetting. If you go, you're not hanging out with a bunch of fakes. These are real families with good hearts that just want to connect with other really good families and have an enjoyable time at these Jets events with high-end cars and great opportunities to connect.
Yeah, I do have to say that your son's event was one of, I think, 3 or 4 events that I went to this year. And the other 2 are like ultra secret society level. And then Parker was like, you have to go to Jets and Capital. And it was like, this event looks like it's going to be big. And he's like, I promise there are no bottom feeders. I was like, okay, let's go. But yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, he does a good job, and he keeps it clean too. It was super interesting. We had the yacht party after the F1 event that we had the airplane thing and the hangar with all the private jets that flew in, and then the yacht party he had one of his attendees said, hey, can I bring 10 more people? And Jordan's like, oh, no, everybody is pre-vetted, and the guy's like, well, they're all like really hot models, and Jordan's like, yeah, these are all really vetted. No, but they're really hot models. And Jordan goes, no, it's not one of those kind of parties. I'm sorry. If they're not a real contributor that my people want to meet with, I don't care if they're really hot models. These are real families with real good people that just want to connect and make the world a better place.
Yeah, it is funny to see that at some events where you walk in and it's like, okay, These are the people from the good family offices that are here to make good strategic partnerships. And here are the gold diggers coming in to see who they can latch onto and run into the ground.
What's so funny about that? Years ago, when I was first building Bridge, we were about 2 or 3 billion in assets under management, and I was at this conference. It was down in Laguna Beach, and there was all of these. It was some pretty high end families there, and I'm looking around and I'm trying to figure out who the real check writers are and who the CPAs and attorneys are that are working for the families, because I want to connect with the families themselves. And so I'm looking around and I see this guy, and he's kind of shorter, he's Asian, he's got long, straight, stringy hair, and he has on his arm, he has the hottest girl I've seen in a long time. She was on the cover of Elle magazine that month. She was on like 5 supermodel magazines over the last 3 months alone. And, someday when I write a book on how to raise 20-30 billion dollars, I'm going to have a whole chapter that's called Follow the Supermodel She Always Knows. Right? Because, this guy was like 8th generation billionaire family from Asia that was, had almost $1 billion a year that he was allocating of new money coming in from his family. And so yeah, it was so funny. I was like, okay, I've got to build a relationship with this guy, but I can't just walk up to him and say, hey, you've got the hottest girl in the room and you're kind of short and stringy hair. You're obviously the richest guy. I couldn't really say that. And so, I knew there was a disparagement there, and you kind of watch for those things. And so he stands up and he's like, okay, I'm going to, it looked like he was going out front to go get his car. So they stand up to walk out front. And sure enough, he hands his ticket to the bellman to go, the valet to go get his car. And I thought, oh, this is my opportunity. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to give my ticket. Now we had just, we had a couple billion under management, but I wasn't getting Ferrari rental cars at my events, and so I was just a regular rental car. So I give my ticket, and then I'm thinking, oh crap, I hope they don't bring his Rolls Royce before they bring my Hyundai rental car, But that 2 minutes of uncomfortable silence waiting for our car, sure enough, I built a relationship with him where he gave me his card and wrote down his home phone, his cell phone number on it. It wasn't even on his card normally. And he said, call me. I want to get together with you guys and talk about strategy. And so it was beautiful. Just so I don't know where that came from. We were talking about supermodels at parties, but I guess if they're in that context, there's some value in following the supermodel she always knows.
Yeah, I think, but I also think we're totally going off on like a complete tangent here, guys.
We're making it fun.
We'll maybe do another episode, so you can get the answers to everything. But it's also like with the past generations, for example, the Koch family. Wyatt Koch and I, the first thing we bonded over was that our fathers were these brilliant financial geniuses and our mothers were Ford models in New York City. And our fathers wanted to marry because that was the thing at the time. In the 80s, you married, if you were a prominent guy, who was successful on Wall Street, you married someone from the Ford modeling agency. But with this generation, with a lot of so many things have changed with my guy friends. I walked up with one of them at this event, and there's this woman with so much plastic surgery done on her face, and she's throwing herself at him, and he's from a very good family. And I walk over and I was like, are you okay? And he's like, save me. And he put his arms around back, pulled me in. So everyone thought I was there with him. And then I was like, okay, you want to walk out with me because I'm leaving. But yeah, it's a very different time. I think 10, 20 years ago, you could just follow the models, but they ruined enough legacy families that you don't see that as much as you used to. Which was very forward thinking of Jordan to say they're no longer allowed here. Mm-hmm. No, I'm going to protect my network, and those who are here to make money are not going to have a gold digger coming in and ruining their family empire.
Exactly. Beautifully said.
Yeah, thank you. So when you write that book, I want to be the first to know because I'm going to buy it because I need all of that advice. My family likes to throw us into the deep end. They're like, you'll figure it out. And so then I call the 5 smartest people around the world about that. What do I need to give you for you to mentor me? That's just how we do it. But it'd be great if there was a book. So What was the first thing you did when you started Bridge Investment Group?
The first thing I did was partnering up with somebody who could fill in all the areas that I was weak. So John Pennington he was crossing every T and dotting every I. I could walk into a room and identify all the wealthy guys and become their best friend by the end of the day and have all of them trust me enough to come and take a second look. I could make it rain, and I could really make it rain. But if it was just me by myself, when it rained, everything turned to mud, right? I needed somebody who had structure, that I knew that if I put my grandmother's money into what we were creating, it was safe. It was done right. I didn't have to deal with SEC regulations. I didn't have to deal with the banking stuff, all of the legal things. I knew that was all taken care of. And John understood me. I can't tell you how many times where, I was at an NBA game on the front row with some guys, and it was 10 o'clock at night. The game just ended, and John calls me with some questions. He's still in the office doing the paperwork. And John understood that I wasn't there just to hang out with, I brought in $30 million. This is early days when we didn't have money, right? I brought in $30 million from connections I made at that NBA game, right? And then when I'm down in southern Utah on a Hummer off-road trip, I knew that if guys were driving a $150,000 Hummer and rolling it, they probably had some cash to spare, right? And so I was building the relationships to bring in that initial money while he was doing all the detail work. And so finding somebody that matches on the other end was everything. John and I remember, it was so funny. We were in an office so small that we would turn around and bump elbows, and it was just the two of us. This is, up to about 10 million, 20 million under management. And people ask John today, they're like, did you see it? Did you see the billions? And he goes, no, but ironically, Paul kind of did. He said, we'd be in the room and would have a deal where we needed $25,000 by Friday. And Paul was on the phone calling all of his contacts, trying to get that extra 25,000. He said, and he said, Paul would turn around and say, John, we're going to be $1 billion fund someday. I put my little pinky by the side of my mouth like Austin Powers, right? We're going to be $1 billion fund. And John's like, Paul, we need $25,000 by Friday. Okay. So he was the realist. I was the dreamer, but together we were able to make it work and build it up to the point where we could attract. And it was interesting too. As we started growing, I remember John said to me, he said, Paul, he said, that neither you nor myself have the background nor the pedigree to run and manage a $10-20 billion investment fund. I'm a University of Utah dropout, right? And he has an MBA, but it's not a JD MBA from an Ivy League school. And so we'd have this conversation. He goes, yeah, Paul, he said, but if we build it right, if we build it with integrity, if we build a solid foundation, he said, we will attract the right team members that can manage it. And so literally by the time we hit 100 million, neither one of us had the pedigree to be in the CEO, the management positions, a higher end one. So, I was manager of capital markets, and, he was a COO, but we hired guys with JD MBAs to have that credibility, that pedigree, so that when we did go into Morgan Stanley, we could have them write $100 million check, a $200 million check, because we had the track record that me and John had created, and now we had augmented it with the right team at the right time.
I think one of the most admirable things is the level of respect and admiration that the two of you have for each other. Like when I bring up your name with him, his face lights up, like as if you guys are like brothers. Like, and then when I bring up, I remember when I handed you my book and I flipped to his page, the way your face lit up, and I was like, wow, like that's a rare partnership.
We love each other. We were joined at the hip for 10 years as we were building the foundation of it, and I understood John and his amazing strengths, and I never tried to step on his toes because of how much I respected him, and vice versa. And that's what was important. I actually respected John so much and I was so high level in talking to people that if somebody from our legal firm or whatever put a piece of paper in front of me, a massive document that needed my signature on it, I told him this, listen, I don't have time to read the details. If John's signature is on it, I will sign it. If it's not, I won't. That's how I operate. And so that's the level of trust that I had with him and vice versa as we were building.
How did you meet?
Well, I had a company that I had sold. The company I sold for $20 million when I was 29 years old was a marketing company. I had a company that helped people overcome anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, childhood trauma. I had 50,000 people a month calling in off of an infomercial to get help with these things, and a public company wanted to buy me, and so they wanted the marketing arm, the team that I had, background, et cetera. So they bought me. They were the ones that bought me for the 20 million. Well, John had helped take that company public. And about a year, part of my buyout was the fact that I had to stay on with that company for at least a year as marketing director. Well, a year into the company, I found out that some of the management, the CEO and the CFO, I found out they were dirty. I mean, these guys were putting out press reports that weren't true. They claimed that the company had IP that they didn't have. And so I told the board of directors, I said, listen, I'm going to Africa. I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro. I'll be gone for 2 weeks. If I come back and those guys are still running the show, I'm going public with all the information I know, because these guys are, I will not work in a company that doesn't have integrity. I said, the only guy that I trust in this entire thing is that guy who took you guys public, that John Pennington guy. I said, I trust him. I don't trust anybody else. I said, if him or somebody like him is the president of the company when I come back, I'll stay on. We'll fix this thing. We'll make it work. If not, I'm done. I'm out of here. So I went to Africa, climbed Kilimanjaro, came back. Sure enough, John was the CEO of the company. Those guys were out, and we put things together, made it work, and then from there ended up building Bridge.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. For those of you from like my East Coast group who know my father, who don't know Mr. Pennington, they have like a 95% personality overlap. They're just like salt of the earth. They're teaching people, they lead with integrity. They make money honestly. If there's an opportunity to make an extra dollar by cheating someone, they don't do it. And I remember someone was saying, you have to check out the Penningtons. When I was looking at expanding our strategic partnership book, and I was like, the Penningtons, they're Mormon, we're Jewish. They're like, you don't understand. This guy has like a literally 95% overlap. And so then I went to the event, and people are telling me bits and pieces about his parenting style and his leadership style. And it was like, oh my God, this is literally the Mormon version of my father, like the Utah manufactured version. But yeah, it's very cool to get to know you and the other side of the story, and a lot of what you're saying, because I was like, this is the chief investment officer of the fund I just joined. Like, you're literally describing our relationship. Like, a lot of what I'm doing is similar to you on your tracks, and then a lot of what Grant is doing is similar to John's. This is very encouraging for me personally. But maybe by the end of this episode, I'll convince you to be my mentor.
I would be honored, Adi. I would be honored.
Awesome. Okay. So what were some obstacles that you were surprised to face in your earliest months or years at Bridge?
I was surprised that I didn't know. Now I'm not surprised because I know how the industry works. But I was surprised that the bigger institutions were kind of run by the inner circle Ivy League friends groups, right? If I was a University of Utah dropout, it didn't matter if I was the founder, right? It was so valuable once we got over 100 million. It was really valuable to have JD MBAs from Harvard and others that were on our team. And so that was an eye-opener. The progress, there's a very different style and a different people and different skill sets you need that go from 0 to 100 million. And then a different group that you need from 100 million to a billion. And then a whole different team going from 1 billion to 10 billion, 20 billion, et cetera. And I will say that credibility, track record is everything. I remember it took us an entire year to raise $2 million, and $1 million of it was basically our own that we were syndicating with other people's money. By the time I retired, we were bringing in $10 million a day. And it was simply because we had built a track record with audited financials that helped create that trust and that credibility to be able to take it to that new level.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. What is one piece of advice that you have for those starting their journey in capital raising?
Integrity is everything. You might be able to get away with doing something out of integrity for your first little bit, but you will never get big. It will always come out.
Yeah.
If you're taking somebody's money and if a deal goes bad, be completely transparent about it. Be open. John and I created something, and later with Don when he came on, created something called the total transparency model, which there's if you guys remember Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, his son, Stephen M.R. Covey, had a book called The Speed of Trust. And in his seminars, when he was teaching and going around talking about the speed of trust, he used me and John's example of the total transparency model as a way to accelerate that growth. And so basically what we have is we even opened up our investment meetings every single week to our LPs, not just the GPs, the LPs. We literally opened it up to have come in person or on the phone. We opened it up so that they could tune in and hear everything. If we had a hurricane that came through and hit one of our Texas properties and we ended up having some loss, they heard the whole thing and they saw how we handled dealing with that problem and working through it, et cetera. So that total transparency all the way through was something that created a quote speed of trust, stealing from Stephen M.R. Covey's book, that allowed us to grow bigger and faster and bigger and faster and continue that momentum because of the integrity, because of the fact that we had that total transparency model.
I'm taking notes. Okay. I've heard that book before, but now I'll actually read it. Yeah, I read a lot, if you could not tell.
That's awesome. Readers are leaders. You know, they say that if you, it was interesting. When I very first started my career in my early 20s, this is before I had the successful company that helped people with anxiety, depression, et cetera. I had a mentor, and he said, Paul, he said that the most valuable piece of real estate you'll ever own is the 6 inches between your ears. He said, you spend every day developing that real estate, everything else will come together. He said, if you read at least a book a month and listen to an audio program every day on leadership and business and finance and relationships, he said, 3 months from now, nobody will know that you're doing it. 3 years from now, everybody in your inner circle will know that you've been doing it because you will have grown so much that they have seen it. 30 years from now, a good part of humanity will know that you're doing it because you will have made such an impact in the lives of other people. And so, yeah, readers are leaders, but those who are consistent all the time can really make an impact.
There was a quote on Instagram that I read last week, and it said, if you don't think you've grown at all in the past year, answer this question. Would you want to trade spots with who you were a year ago? I was like, no, no, I would not. Bridge grew to manage over 10 billion in assets in a very short period of time. What strategic decisions or values do you believe were key to scaling the firm so successfully? You've already touched upon a few things like the transparency framework, the weekly meetings with the GPs and LPs so they could see your problem solution process.
One thing that really accelerated us is John and I early on brought on a guy by the name of Don Hartman. Donaldson Hartman was, his resume was the most impressive piece of paper I'd ever seen. He had raised billions of dollars to bail out the Asian debt crisis in the late 90s. And we hired him to help us have that look and feel necessary to go after the bigger institutions. And I remember he came into my office in December of 2006. And he said, Paul, we're in trouble. And I said, we the fund? He goes, no, we that probably the whole country, if not the whole world. He had all these third order polynomial equations that were way over my head. He said, we're looking at a financial crisis. This was a year and a half before the 2008 crisis. He said, we're looking in the eyes at a financial crisis that is going to be catastrophic. He now the reason we listened to him is that in the late 90s, this was, he was in Asia working with Citigroup and wrote a series of reports that predicted the Asian crisis 9 months before it happened. And he was so well respected internationally that guys like George Soros was shorting the bot $2 billion a day based on Don's advice, and 4 countries took away his visa because he wouldn't resend his statements. They thought they were putting their currency at risk. And so 9 months later, everything he said would happen did. The bot broke, bottom fell out, largest financial crisis in history up to that time. Fast forward, he's now our employee working in as our new partner and tells us that the sky's going to fall in. And so we decided to listen. And at the time, me and John were running a company called Bridge Loan Capital, doing short-term asset-based bridge loans. That's where the bridge name came from, right? And he said, you can't be doing bridge loans. Lenders are going to be owners when this whole thing falls apart. You can't be hard money lenders. And so we decided to listen to him and did a strategy change, became one of the first funds in the country to be qualified in the country during that crisis, to be qualified on a top level purchasing platform with all the GSEs, with Freddie, Fannie, HUD, FDIC. So when the 2008 crisis started to hit, boom, we were already front row, and we had a whole bunch of dry powder because we had got out of a bunch of other loans, and we were just sitting there holding. And as soon as that crisis hit, boom, now we were in a position where as a top level purchasing platform, when a bank had 30 days to live, we were the ones that got the phone call. And we went in. By then, the bank president's willing to negotiate. He's got $100 million portfolio that we offer $30 million cash for, which is enough to keep him liquid. He knows 30 days from now he's out of a job, and the shareholders have a big fat zero if the FDIC takes him over. But if we come in with that cash injection, boom, it's a win for the banks. It's a win for us. If we picked up $100 million note for $30 million, then we had the team
the
put
white
together.
knight strategy.
It was huge, and it was a true win-win-win. Nobody was losing because our investors were winning, our employees were winning, the tenants too. These properties are being managed by a bank that had already foreclosed on them, that there's weeds and that pool drains aren't working, all this stuff. Well, we had a team that we had put together that knew how to manage those things effectively. Ironically, their name was Bridge Property Management. We were Bridge Loan Capital. So we came together and created Bridge Investment Group. And with that credibility of them, with Don seeing it beforehand, with us being already a authorized purchaser, boom, we end up with over a 40% IRR when the rest of the market was losing 30 and 50%, just nosediving. We were the only ones that weren't losing everybody's money because we had positioned ourselves right. So they say make money when there's blood in the streets. I don't like to make money because of the blood and the pain of people, but I like to make money when there's blood in the streets by providing first aid kits for the people who were suffering, right? So that's what happened. By having that forethought and having the right team in place, we were able to provide a solution for the banks, a solution for the tenants, a solution for people who were investors who were losing money everywhere else. And we were able to explode in our growth because we saw it, we had the right team in place, and we were able to provide those solutions.
That's so. I love that you're sharing this story, because that's literally how I structured this fund that I'm working on now. Is I said, look, we're going to put money into these assets because I know people we can easily sell them, and we're holding these these office buildings in a specific industry in specific locations, and then when the blood hits the streets, we can enter and scoop up these assets as the white knight. But I think the first aid kit analogy is better than the white knight.
Either one is good.
I'm very excited to hear that what I thought I should do is what you did. So I'm on the right track.
Excellent.
Which is encouraging. All right. So this is a fan favorite question. What are some tools and tactics that you use to manage your time and your team effectively? It's a 4,000 person team. That's huge.
Is huge, and I'm not very good at managing them. I had a personal assistant that was worth her weight in gold 10 times over. I mean, her name was Kitty, and she she literally could type faster than I could think. We would be in a strategy meeting, and by the time I said, "Hey, can you pull up that website and get some information on that?" She's like, "Already done. I've got the report for you." I'm like, what? She literally would outthink me and outtype me and outperform on everything. She was just incredibly efficient. And so in having that type of a person that was literally managed everything about my life, it allowed me to be infinitely more productive with my time. And there was a point where I actually had 4 personal assistants. Kitty was like right there as my personal assistant, but then we had one that was managing, travel, and one that was managing all of the contacts that I had coming in and making sure that we were following up on those. And so I had a lot of personal assistants. What was so interesting too, I remember right before I retired, we had almost 4,000 employees, and we had 70 plus employees just in accounting. And there was a young man, I think his name was Andrew. He came in, and his job that day was to have the partners sign up on our expense reports. And he comes into my office, and he has my expense report. Now, by then, head of capital markets, or I was just raising money, and my expense report had really nice restaurants all around the world, flights all around, front row seats at NBA games, all this. It was like nice stuff because I was wining and dining all of our investors. And I'm signing off on the expense report, and Andrew says, "Mr. Hutchinson, do you mind me asking, how did you get your job?" And I realized he didn't know the history of the company. I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, you have the best job in the whole company. All you do is fly around the world and go to lunch with rich people. How did you get that job?" So I decided to mess with him a little bit. I said, "Well, Andrew, I used to do what you do." He goes, "Really? You were in accounting?" I said, "Yeah." I said, I had a spreadsheet that kept track of the net asset valuation of each one of our investments and all of I said it was like a 70 megabyte spreadsheet. I said, and now Adam did our audits. Now Adam is now his boss, right? I said, Adam came in and was doing the audits for the company, and Adam looked at this and he said, "Paul," he said, "all of these numbers are right, but there's a hell of a lot easier ways of doing it than what you're doing." I said, "So I got replaced by Adam." He goes, "You did?" I said, "Yeah, really. I just hired Adam to replace me." Right? I said, then I did what Jonathan does, and Jonathan is now currently today is the CEO of Bridge. But back then, Jonathan was doing underwriting. I said, so then I did what Jonathan does. He goes, "Really?" He said, "You were underwriting all the assets?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Every day I had big stacks of paper that just drove me crazy. I had a headache going home." And so we brought Jonathan in to replace me. He goes, "Oh, really? Okay." I said, "The only thing I was any good at was going to lunch with rich people. So that's where they put me." And he goes, "Oh, wow." He said, well, how many people were here when you started?" I said, "Just me and John." And so, I guess the answer there is as you scale, we had to be the head cook and bottle washer, and knowing each job, then replacing ourselves with people who were by far more effective than us, and then they could build those teams to the point where now you've got 70 people in accounting that are all working for the guy that you replaced yourself with, right? And so yeah. It was a beautiful transition, but yeah, that's how we knew everything, every little part of it, as we built, and then we replaced ourselves with the right team.
Yeah, I've done that when I've come into like the startups that are rapidly growing. Like, you need to start, your marketing team needs to be like a graphic designer and a copywriter, and then they'll get too much work, and then you hire more people to come in and fill out what they don't like to do. But with my mother's company, it's now she's now done like 623 million in real estate, and she would call me and she'd say, "Okay, what do I do next?" I'm like, "What's the thing you don't like doing?" She's like, "This." It was like, "Okay, so you hire someone to do that." And that's literally how she built out her team. I think it's now like 30 or 40 people, but not 4,000. But I mean, they're still under $1 billion.
Yeah. What's interesting is Bridge went from about 4,000 employees when I retired, but there was roughly 4,000 employees. Today, they have about 2,000, which means that half of what it was back then. So either they got way more efficient, or they outsourced a bunch of things that they didn't want to have running internally, which is, I believe, what happened. So,
yeah. Yeah. Or ChatGPT took over half the jobs.
Exactly. That's probably what happened.
When I was writing the marketing book, a bunch of young marketers were like, but marketing's going to be obsolete. And it was like, if you are not the revenue producer in the company, yes, your job will be taken over by ChatGPT. But okay, so let's see. We're going to segue now to from finance to philanthropy. What inspired your transition from leading a successful investment firm to dedicating your life to combating child trafficking?
To kind of bring you to this space. So in my early 20s, before I even had a successful company, I had a mentor that said, Paul, that the average person donates about 2% of their annual income to charity. He said, sadly, millionaires average even less than 2%. He said, but the decamillionaires and the centimillionaires and the billionaires, he said, a lot of them have an interesting story of giving back. He said, if you choose today that number isn't 2%, it's upwards of 10, 15, even 20%. He said, yeah. you can call it karma, you can call it the universal law of exchange, you can call it God, call it whatever you want to. There's a higher power very interested in us doing good, and your success will be radically enhanced with you making a decision to give back in a big, big way. And, so I tell people, I says, how does somebody become a partner, let alone a founder of a 20, $30 billion investment fund where you're not a University of Utah dropout, right? The statistical probability of me being where I am is zero. And the only way I understand it is that I had a few what I called multipliers in place. And one of those key multipliers was charity. And I believe that everything that I did to give back, I got massive benefits coming back literally in terms of the growth of the company and the introductions to the right people, et cetera. And I will say this, a little tidbit, a great place to meet centimillionaires and billionaires is at charity functions. And so I was at all of them. I was at everything from the Alzheimer's Foundation to, the list went on and on and on. Anything that was raising money for a charity, I was there. I would get a cheap seat in the back with $200 seat, but I was there so that I could connect with the people that were in the room. And so that's kind of where things started. But as things progressed, we had a few billion under management, and I was about 11 years ago, and I got a phone call from our attorney general. And he said, Paul, I know you've donated millions of dollars to child-related charities. I'd like to talk to you about something that's pretty dark. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. Good people don't know that it's happening. He starts talking about human trafficking. And he said he introduced me to a team of former government agents and others who were in Cartagena, Colombia. These guys had a sting operation that they were putting together and found 20 children that were being sold as child sex slaves. Just a horrific situation. And they needed $50,000 to rescue the kids. And so I helped to make that happen. And I then got a phone call a few weeks later from one of the operators. And he said, Paul, we're here in Cartagena. There's not just 20 children. There's more than 50. And there's more than 100 children in the surrounding cities that are tied to some of these rings. He said, we believe we can rescue all of these children on the same day at the same time, but I need your help. And I said, well, how much do you need? Thinking he needed a bigger check. He said, I need you. Can you be in Colombia in 2 days? He said that the head traffickers have a piece of property they want to develop into a child brothel, resort, hotel type thing. They need a few $1 million to build it out. They believe they can make tens of millions of dollars a year selling these victims to wealthy Americans. And so my role is to come down and pretend like I was interested in funding their project under one condition. They would have a party, bring together all of their victims, and if I was impressed with what they had, then I would fund it. And so, and this agent knew more about my background than most people. I have certain set of skills from a previous life that makes me somewhat safe in a dangerous place. But most importantly, they needed somebody who could negotiate this deal. He says, I can't teach my Navy SEALs how to wear a $50,000 watch and negotiate a multi-million-dollar deal. These guys will see through fake money all day long. And so 2 days later, I'm face to face with the most evil people on the planet, negotiated this deal, ended up being the largest child rescue operation that I knew of at the time in history. 124 children, I think it was. And I remember sitting on a chair and seeing these children, literally 10, 11 years old, that were there standing in front of me. And I'm thinking, how is this even a thing anywhere in the world? And this one little child, the one that we kind of made the movie following, she was standing in front of me with tear stains on her makeup face. And I made a commitment to myself, to God, to that child, that I would dedicate my life to eradicating that evil from the face of the earth. And fast forward, I led or played a key part in over 70 undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries. I retired completely from Bidge. I retired. I'm still an owner, still a founder. Only thing I did was get myself off the payroll. I was only earning $500,000 a year on payroll. The majority of my income was coming as my GP interest and as a founder, et cetera. And so I decided to dedicate full time to the project of eradicating child trafficking. I started the Child Liberation Foundation, and now those numbers are even bigger than you quoted earlier. Through my foundation and others that we have helped to fund and start, over 7,000 children are now back to their families. And beyond that, I'm the primary investor and executive producer behind the movie Sound of Freedom, and over 70 million people have seen that film, and hundreds of millions of children are safer now because of it.
My sister, after she saw that film with my mother, went to Colombia to some nonprofit that works with children that were saved. And my brother and I, our sister's the youngest. My brother and I, like the natural born protectors, were like, you are blonde hair, blue eyes. Get out of there. Like, you cannot help. You're going to be kidnapped yourself. So now she's in New Zealand working on a different charity. But I was just like, we appreciate what you want to do, Maddie, but you're literally exactly the type they would love to take and put on the sex slave trade. You cannot be in like a position where you're in that much danger. Especially being from her family, because then if they find that out too, like there's so many reasons for them to want to kidnap her. But yeah, I know that the movie changed a lot of people's lives. Wow.
It was incredibly effective, and that's what we need. I knew I couldn't take millions of people to see what I had seen, but we could help millions of people feel what I had felt. And so we put together actually 8 different child rescue missions, together with about 20 plus different operators and their stories. And we brought them together into just a handful of actors. But all those things really happened. They just happened in different areas. I mean, for example, there was a different operator who was there when the little boy came across the border, and the little girl really was there in Colombia when we did that rescue. The jungle scene later was a different country, a different team, looking for a little boy, not a little girl. But all those things happened. We just kind of put those stories together so that reader could really understand the gravity of this, so that we could make an impact. I mean, realize this, Adi. Back at the time of Abraham Lincoln, it wasn't guys like me. It wasn't the rescuers that created the biggest difference. It was people like you. It was people who had podcasts, right? They didn't have podcasts back then. It was people like Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was the media. It was the podcasts of the age that created an awareness of influential people, just like what you do with your podcast here. It created an awareness with good people of what was going on in the South. In fact, years later, when Abraham Lincoln met Harriet, he shook her hand. He said, "So you're the little lady that wrote the book that started the big war." And so today, that's really what's making the impact, is the influencers and the movie, et cetera, because that's creating awareness so that good people everywhere can say, no, we're going to contribute. We're going to do something to make a positive impact in the world. And because of that, now the Child Liberation Foundation has helped to change laws and policies everywhere. We have certification programs that are helping to make educators and those in law enforcement, and even those in hospitality or in the medical world aware of what's going on. We took down a massive ring between Peru and Ecuador because the medical professionals in the hospital knew what to look for when one of the little girls got beat up and brought in, and we were able to take down that ring. And so those are, I believe we've saved millions more children now because of the movie and these programs within child liberation than we ever were when I was doing undercover child rescue missions.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of legislation and statutes of limitations lifted across the U.S. as well. And so
exactly.
Predators who got away with things decades ago are now finally being held accountable for it. So thank you.
The team effort, lots of good people that have been involved in this fight.
Yeah, and to circle back to your thing where you're saying people invest like between 1% and 10%, or 1% and 2%. With my family, the rule was always 10%. So anytime if we got paid for anything from my parents, they were like, "Well, where's that 10% going? Did you put your 10% aside?" And most of these awards and trophies are for nonprofit work.
Love that. That's what I loved. The very first time we met, I could feel that about you. Your heart is in such a giving space, and you know, it doesn't matter whether somebody is Jewish or Muslim or Christian. Most of them believe in the Old Testament, or you know, the Torah, and the book of Malachi very clearly says that if you tithe, if you give 10%, that the windows of heaven will open, that there will not be room enough to receive it. That's the inside secret of the ultra wealthy, guys. It's not 2%, it's 10 or more. And again, you can call it karma, you can call it the universe, you can call it God. There's a higher power very interested in us doing good, and you will receive those rewards when you make that commitment.
And I know we didn't exactly plan on doing this, but is there a link where people who are listening to the podcast could donate to the Child Liberation Foundation?
That would be incredibly beautiful. It's you can go to just childliberation.org. So just childliberation.org and get stuff there. I will say this, the Liberating Humanity, and you can go to liberatinghumanity.com right now, currently is a for-profit. We just finished meetings the last 2 days. We're going to move that to a nonprofit that will be supporting not only Child Liberation Foundation, but it'll be supporting the build out of the healing retreats and helping adults break free from their own childhood trauma, which happens to a lot of us. 1 in every 4 women listening today has been an experience of sexual trauma as a child. And with men, it's a little bit less. It's 1 in every 5 at some time in our lives. But even them, 1/4 of them, it was under the age of 10 years old in their own home. So many people are dealing with this heavy stuff that if we can help them heal, just, you know, we've got the healing programs for the trafficked children that we're working in the safe houses, et cetera. But we realize that there's such a challenge, especially in the United States, with so many people dealing with unhealed trauma as children. And so back to my first successful company that I sold years ago, 30 years ago, had a company that helped people with anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, and childhood trauma. Today, Liberating Humanity does that together with the sanctuaries that we have around the world and the Child Liberation Foundation. So I believe it's an overreaching focus that's going to fix the problem before it becomes a problem. It's not just rescuing the kids. It's healing the adults so they never pass that trauma on. It's healing the adults so that it doesn't come out in anger issues or addictions or low self-esteem or anxiety, depression, etc. We're really, really good at helping people break free of those. Really good at it. We just finished a 7-day fully immersive, transformational healing retreat that in the beginning, we used to bring in just women who had dealt with childhood trauma. And then we brought in some of my operators, Green Berets, Navy SEALs who had PTSD, and brought them into these. Now we work with what I call the tip of the umbrella. These are influencers, billionaire families, royalty, people who can really move the needle that sadly, most of us have some of those challenges as well. And so we bring people like that together, similar to what Jordan does with Jetson Capital, with thousands of people that are all vetted. Mine are about 10 people at a time that are very vetted, that all come in for 7 days for a deep, fully immersive transformational experience. And so that's all we're moving that over to the 501c3 as well. But right now that's a for-profit with the sanctuary as well. But that's the Child Liberation Foundation is just childliberation.org.
And then you have let's focus, I guess, on that for a second. So your retreat, if they want to attend your retreat or learn more about it, what is that URL?
That's Liberating Humanity. Just Liberating Humanity. Yeah, you can find me on all social media on Liberating Humanity on Facebook, Instagram, etc. I think LinkedIn, it's just still my name, Paul Hutchinson. But yeah, Liberating Humanity, and you can just scroll down and you'll see, learn more about our retreats, and it has all the information on those. We have one in October and one in September, the next two that aren't filled. The June is filled, the July is filled. They're those ones in September, October, they're $11,000 per person. But I promise it will be worth $50,000 to $100,000 to you. And I'm not promoting it because it's all going to charity 100%. I'm not making a penny off of it. But helping humanity heal is really what my passion is.
And in September, kind of pinballing a little bit of a different direction. September, you're also speaking at an event in New York City, right?
I've got a bunch of them. My son Jordan has another Jetson Capital that's in New York in the end of September. And then there's a couple, they've got me speaking, and I don't even know what all of them are. I'm literally speaking 8 times in the next 30 days at conferences and big podcasts. And so they've got me speaking a lot. I speak at family office events and big real estate conferences and stuff, and all of my speaking fees go to charity as well. So I don't make money on those. It's all 100% of that goes into fighting child trafficking and making the world a better place.
And you have a book coming out.
Yes, The Sound of Freedom. How's that for a name? So I had it named other things, and my publishers are like, Paul, you have to
play with it.
Yeah, play with it. You've got 70 million people who have seen the movie. And so, yeah, The Sound of Freedom is coming out in bookstores, on Amazon, all of that, the end of July. And so I think this might be coming out somewhere around there, but it would be, and here's the thing. It's not like the movie. It's not just, okay, let's tell the stories of the child rescue missions. There's a lot of information in there that's incredibly valuable for parents and keeping their kids safe. The whole first section, the first 6 chapters is called The Making of an Undercover Operator, but it talks about situational awareness and being aware of what's going on. It's very educational on the things that I did to put myself in a place where I could be safe, somewhat safe in those dangerous places, et cetera. And so parents will learn a lot from that. And then I take them through the rescue missions that the movie was made of. But the last 6 chapters are all about healing humanity, about what do we need to do to elevate global consciousness? What do we need to do to help people heal from those things that don't serve them, and understanding how even if we would never ever hurt a child, how the ripple effect of our words and our actions, if it's coming from a place of anger or fear or judgment or anything from an unhealed soul, is going to negatively affect the world around us. So there's a lot of information in The Sound of Freedom. And if you don't remember Liberating Humanity, you can just type in SOF book, Sound of Freedom book.com, and it'll link you right into Liberating Humanity, or just Sound of Freedom book will take you in there as well.
Or if you Google Paul and this comes up, you'll see it in the show notes. We'll just have to include all the
things.
So you have everything, so you don't lose anything. Yeah, I think that'll be really interesting to see the ripple effects of that book. I know some of the people that I grew up with that went through cognitive behavioral therapy. Afterwards, they became super successful people because they learned resilience. And those who went to traditional therapists who had them keep rehashing the trauma of their childhoods as adults. I remember walking into one of their apartments and he had 27 different medications on the counter. And he was morbidly obese, and he had to take these 27 different medications because the therapist thought that he should just keep retelling the story for 3 hours, 3 times a week.
Yeah, that's what keeps you addicted to all that crap. There's no reason to rehash it. We can help heal the pain without even talking about what happened. Ironically, you don't even have to remember what happened. If these were things that were buried subconsciously, and some things that happened 3 or 4 years old, you don't even remember what they are, but there's something wrong. There's something because you're super uncomfortable in certain situations. You're dealing with anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, anger issues, low self-esteem, worry, what if thinking, all of these things, and you're like, where is this coming from? It's likely coming from something that was buried as a child, and you don't even have to unbury it. You just have to uncouple from it. You have to change those negative habit patterns of thought, worry, what if thinking. You can change those things by some cognitive restructuring rather than rehashing that. And for sure, medications. In fact, we tell people if you're on Xanax and Prozac, we have almost 100% success rate in helping people get off of those heavy medications. Now, sadly, we have to have them off of them for about 4 days before they come down to our retreat because they're just masking everything. We have to help pull off that mask so that we can get down to the wound, fix the wound so you have real permanent change at a core level, not masking it with a bunch of medications and not rehashing those events over and over again.
Wild. What made you decide to start your first company helping people with anxiety and PTSD?
I was actually going to be a doctor. I wanted to be a pediatric cardiologist. I remember when I was a little kid, I walked in, I said, Mom, I want to be a surgeon. She goes, really? What kind of surgeon? I said, I want to be a brain surgeon. She goes, well, why? I said, because I got beat up at school today and I want to fix how people think. That's kind of how I was. Well, as I progressed, I changed it to being a heart surgeon. And I think I realized that the problems with bullying and stuff had nothing to do with the brain. They had everything to do with the heart. Right. And so I legitimately I took all the pre-med classes. I was 2 months away from taking the MCAT when I got in a major car accident and I severed all the tendons in my hand. And they didn't know if I'd have the dexterity to be a surgeon. It took years in repairing everything back to where it's somewhat normal. But they said, you probably can't be a surgeon, especially a heart surgeon. You might not have the dexterity, but you could be a regular doctor. And I said, well, I don't want to be a regular anything. That's why I want to be a surgeon and a heart surgeon and one that operated on kids. I want to specialize. I said, if I got one life to live, if I'm going to be a garbage man, I'm going to own the dump. That's just how I think. I'm not going to be a regular or anything. And so I changed my major to business and finance. I had a mentor that said, Paul, he said, I'm not going to invest with you. I'm not going to work with you. He says, but if you do what I teach you to do, you'll be a millionaire by the time you're 30 and you'll have the time to enjoy it. And I says, okay, what do I do? He says, well, you need to learn how to handle rejection and you need to learn how to sell. And so I quit my job at the hospital, got a job at a call center selling children's videos. And then they brought in a new account, Lucinda Bassett's Attacking Anxiety and Depression program. And I jumped onto that account and became the top salesperson in that account within a few weeks because I was passionate about it. Because in my high school years, I was the president of the peer leadership team, which helped kids with drug and alcohol abuse and home domestic abuse and anxiety, depression, et cetera. So I was already passionate about it because of helping out in high school. So I got super passionate there. Ended up starting a marketing company called Midwest Center Marketing that did worldwide marketing for Lucinda Bassett's program, took that all over. That's the company that I ended up selling at 29 years old. But I personally figured that I spoke to somewhere between 10 and 15,000 people on the phone myself. This is even when I had 200 employees that were in a call center calling and selling a personal coaching program to help people overcome. But back then, it took us 12 weeks with a personal coach, 1 to 2 hours a day, to help somebody who had debilitating anxiety, depression, PTSD addictions to be able to get to the point where they live on using cognitive structures would help them break free of having to be on their medications and live a normal life, et cetera. Today, we're able to do the same thing in less than 7 days. We have some incredibly powerful tools that we work with at our retreats, but it's not going to take 12 weeks. It's not going to take personal coach that whole time to help people truly heal from their childhood trauma and those things that are holding them hostage.
Wow. I didn't realize how much I've like literally followed your entire path because my undergrad degree is medicinal and biological chemistry. and I thought I wanted to be a
Wow.
surgeon. I went to Haiti. My father volunteered me in the triage there to help with surgeries my sophomore year of
Wow.
college. So I didn't even know how
Wow.
to give stitches. And they were like, but you've read a medical book and our doctors haven't. So you're a doctor in Haiti. Welcome. So they had me in surgeries in Haiti. A wolf spider smelled the blood from the surgeries and came into the operating room. You know, those giant hairy spiders
Yeah.
literally operating on this kid's head. And I learned how to give stitches the night before. I'm operating on this kid's head, telling them I'm not qualified to do this. They didn't care. And there's a giant wolf spider climbing up the corner of the operating room. And the guy next to me is like, stay calm. If you move your hand wrong at all, this kid is dead. Like, he's bleeding to death. And I was just like, this is great. And so they had someone come in with a bowl while I'm in the OR, take this giant spider out. And like, when I got back from Haiti, I was like, I don't want to be a doctor. I'm good.
Wow. I'm super impressed with your dad and you guys doing charity stuff there. I did 12 undercover missions in Haiti, and it's a rough place. In fact, I met my wife out of Vanessa. You met her at the events, and I met her in Haiti. I tell people meeting a beautiful Colombian actress is kind of cool, but when she's donating her time at an orphanage in Haiti, that's amazing. And yeah, she's all heart. She's the executive director of the Child Liberation Foundation, and does all the aftercare and the certification programs for helping keep the kids safe, etc. But yeah, we met there in Haiti. Sadly, I was at a funeral for one of my undercover operators. It was the last time I was there. Yeah, we had 4 traffickers got killed while we were on missions, and I had one operator that got stabbed 27 times, another one that got killed, and I was at his funeral. It's not a safe world, but it's we've saved thousands and thousands of children in the process.
My father used to go down to Haiti 3 times a year because they were converting this orphanage into a compound where people had houses and like a whole ecosystem, and they taught them farming and different trade skills and whatnot. And he said a few different times that he went down there, it was disgusting. People would come up to him thinking he was a tourist and ask him if he'd like to come to their island. He could have access to any children he wanted. And he's like, I wanted to throw up.
Yeah. Yeah,
Anyway.
we took down a huge trafficking ring in Haiti. It was the largest trafficking ring in the Caribbean, and included 4 corrupt federal judges as part of that takedown.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it goes all the way to the top in a lot of countries.
Oh my God. All right. Well, we could probably talk for another 2 hours, but we did our 1 hour. We did our a little bit more than an hour. Thank you so much for your time, for walking us through everything you've done. I feel like you've lived 12 lives. It's amazing. It's very, very inspirational. You should be writing your life story for us all to read at some point. And I can't wait to read your capital raising book and your Sound of Freedom book as well.
Sound of Freedom is a lot of that life, guy. I talk about the stuff in high school with the helping the children there and where that came from, and I talk about the anxiety and depression company and building that, and I talk about those because all of it's connected. All of it is, and so yeah, I would be grateful to. I'll make sure that you're the very first. In fact, here's what I'll do, Adi. I'm going to send you a pre-launch copy of the Sound of Freedom book. You just send me your address. I'll have my team send you a pre-launch copy. Everybody else has to wait till July 29th, but I'll send that one to you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll see you in Orlando next week.
Yes.
So, ladies and gents, you have an investment opportunity, as well as quite a few history lessons here for your consideration. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you all back online. Bye.